feel like you were speaking right to me when you said, some people may physically, but just emotionally, cognitively, that's where I really suffer.
Yeah.
And I feel like what was frustrating for me was because I think I recovered so quickly, like walking, talking wise, um, that when I would go to them, I was like, I worked in special education. So I worked with kids with autism. So I could identify things. I'm like, my emotion regulation is non-existent. I go from a normal person to Hulk out. If you poke too many of the buttons, I was like, and then after I'm like, who was that person? Like, oh my gosh. And the like executive functioning of like what's important. Like, I know I have ADHD. Following a conversation with me, I know is a hot mess express, and I feel like they just told me you're good enough. That's what I got, was you're doing good. Like, don't don't nitpick. That's what I was like, so I'm just supposed to be okay that I'm walking and talking, but what I'm saying is not all fluid. So Maddi has helped me with that. I feel like reaching out to the community and knowing that you're like not alone, and everyone, I've been working on meditating, yoga, all those kind of things. And I feel like, I mean, my husband, it's definitely made a progress, but like you said, it's not a destination. Like, I know sometimes I'll be like, I'm doing really good. And then just like,
Yeah, it's okay. I think it's okay that's like normal to have like those bad days or those bad moments, but again, not letting those moments turn into like a mindset where you're stuck in it. And I think the power of like connecting with other people is something that's so underutilized. We have the opportunity to connect with people in so many different ways now. I think we're not using what we do have to our advantage. And like doing things like this and everything you guys are doing and connecting with other stroke survivors is like so amazing. And just like one of the things I always try to do with my patients too, as I mentioned earlier, is like empower them and give them education and so they can make the decisions. My job is not to make the decisions for them. And I think it's important for patients to make their own decisions, and you have to be your best advocate. No one's gonna go out of their way to do,
Right.
you know your body best. You can do your research, and so some people will go out of their ways to help you along the way, but you have to be the one that is your best advocate, because that's the only way that things get done. And with my experiences, I mean, healthcare is kind of scary. It depends where you go, of course, but it can be very scary. And my brother's in medicine too, and some of the stories that he tells me, it's just scary. You just have to be your best. You have to be an advocate for yourself. And that's something I also talk about a little bit in the book too. So I have a question for you guys.
Go ahead.
Obviously talked about happiness, and when I in part 2 of my book, I talk about like the 4 things. But before I get into those 4 things, I argue that in physical therapy school, that I didn't learn about our most important muscle, which is our happiness muscle. And in order to be happy, you have to sort of do a lot of different things to feed our muscles, our happiness muscle, just like we would if we're trying to strengthen or stretch or any other muscle in our body. So I talk about happiness as a muscle. What are like 1 or 2 things that you guys do to sort of flex your happiness muscles? Obviously, being part of this community, but something that has helped you guys in your recovery process, to sort of start to flex your happiness muscle a little bit more.
Well, I have one I could start.
Sure.
And you already know this, Farris, because I think you may have used it in your book, but
Oh yes.
One of my really good friends, his name is Greg. He's the crazy ultramarathon runner. I feel like everyone who's on Instagram like has heard about him and whatever. He just lives a crazy life. But anyways, I was talking to him one day and he told me, follow your smile. Because we were talking about this very thing. We were talking about happiness. And he said, yeah, one thing I always say is just follow your smile. Like, follow what makes you happy, what gives you purpose, and, whatever you want to do. And for me, like, I really took that message to heart. And like, for me, flexing my happiness muscle, what my smile is, a large part of it now is in connecting with this stroke and brain injury community and Tawny and I have already set some ambitious goals for 2021 with growing our YouTube channel and our podcast. So all of that stuff like really gives meaning to my life because I feel like I'm doing something that is not only helping me, but hopefully helping other people too. And just by getting more stories out there, I think the better. And so that's a way that I flex my happiness muscle. And then of course there are other ways, like I'm still very much trying to like improve myself physically. So like going on walks is something that makes me happy. Going on a walk every day if I'm able to. And then like doing exercise for my hand. Like while it's not necessarily something that I enjoy doing, I like the process of it. Like you said, Farris, like I enjoy working on it, knowing in my mind full well that like, okay, maybe my hand will never get back to the left hand it used to be. Like maybe that won't happen. Maybe it won't look normal when I'm doing certain things, but also like I don't really care. You know, like to a certain extent, it's like I've come to a point where I'm okay with that. Like that's not going to prevent me, or that's not going to stop me from trying my best and like working tirelessly to improve and to get better at the things that I want to do. But I'm no longer thinking like, oh, if my left hand doesn't get back to being completely normal and like how it used to be, like then that's bad. Like I don't think like that anymore. Like I do think that there are still ways for me to find meaning and have like an impactful life without, you know, like you could still live a very fulfilled life, even if like physically or cognitively you're not what you thought you would be.
I love you for that. Because that is one of the hardest things about, I just remember someone said it, because it's like, we have the hard part of like, we're literally mourning the death of ourselves, like what we thought our life would be, while trying to build this new life. So I know like for me, the hardest was, you know, all my friends have kids and they're all doing that. And I'm like, I'm just trying to get myself like together right now. So you guys can all lay off about the kid comments. Like, so that's been hard, but has been really helpful by talking in the community and other people and talking about that, and knowing that it's okay to have your own different path and you are doing what you need to do. And Maddi's really helped me with that. Like every Sunday, like you said, doing this, because even when I don't feel good, it's like I'll rest up so I can do this, because I always feel better after it, connecting and, you know, hearing from other people. Because sometimes I can be in my little head and have a pity party, and then you start talking to someone and they say something and you're just like, wow, I needed that perspective. Like, thank you. Has really helped me. Since the stroke, I didn't before have anxiety or depression. So that's one thing that I've really had to work on. Like I have panic attacks. Luckily we've been working, so we haven't, especially with COVID. That's a huge thing for me to say in COVID in LA with all the lockdowns we've had, for me not to have a panic attack. Like I'm very proud of the progress that I've made. But it's been like kind of what Farris said, like being kind to yourself and acknowledging those small wins. Like, you know, on days where it's super gross out, if I'm depressed, like making myself go on that walk or be kinder, and, you know, trying to be outside in the sunshine definitely helps me. That's why I'm happy to be back in California. But if you can't be there, you can definitely do things. The writing, what I'm grateful for, was the biggest thing I got told in physical therapy when I was like depressed. And because I just was like, all I'm journaling is like all this medicine that I'm taking and like my blood pressure, and I can't remember everything. So I'm like, no wonder. I was like, I wake up and first of all, it feels, I was like, I can't see out my eye. It's all crossed in. And I was like, and my head's splitting. Like, what do you have to be grateful for? And when, like you said, when you're around other people and I had to go in for checkups and hear how everyone else was, I was like, okay, yeah, you're lucky you can feel that pain, because you should be dead. Like you shouldn't even be here. So always kind of flipping that and not unpacking and staying there on those bad days.
I love that. And it just speaks to how happiness is just so subjective and different for everyone, you know, and what makes you happy is not going to make me happy necessarily. So I think being able to I think the hardest part is finding what makes us happy. So like with me, I think gratitude is a big thing, and I think being intentional about these things. You can't just say I want to be happier. You have to constantly wake up and make a conscious decision. I always hear happiness being a choice. Yes, I agree with that, but I think it's a constant choice. Every single day you have to wake up and be intentional about your happiness. And one of the things that helps for me is like gratitude. And in my apartment here where I like hang my keys up, there's a little chalkboard where every single morning before I leave for work, I'll just write down one thing I'm grateful for. And that just right away gets me in the mindset of like, think about all the things that I do have. Some days it's not easy, but it doesn't have to be like a crazy thing that you're grateful for. Like just getting up, and I mean, I see it every single day. I know you guys were exposed to it too, like little tiny things like being able to like just get out of bed and, you know, walk down the stairs and put my jacket on myself. Like those little things are things that I think we all take for granted unless we have to sort of see someone going through some sort of trauma, or we have to go through it ourselves. So it's one of the things. Gratitude, I think, is a big sort of vehicle that I use to flex my happiness muscle. In the past, I used to think like my stresses and, you know, if I'm having a bad day, like I almost felt like how can I have a bad day if I'm seeing what I'm seeing at work? Those are real problems. But the day-to-day struggles are not a joke. It's like, just going back to your point, Tony, about like being open and vulnerable is something that I have a hard time with. And like going back to your point about like most of my friends are married and have kids and starting families. I don't have that. And it kind of stresses me out a little bit, but, you know, just being in the mindset of like being grateful for in the moment and staying focused on the process, I think, you know, being grateful again are just driving vehicles for me to flex my happiness muscle. And it's not always easy, but
one of the hardest things I think, and this is something I didn't realize until I started writing my first book, is what makes you happy. Like when I decided that I would write my first book, that was really the first time that I was like, actually, because I'd been in school, I'd been just like going through like the steps that I felt like I needed to do, but I hadn't really like thought like, okay, how do I want to be spending my time? Because now I don't have school to force me to like study and do that. I didn't have a job in the beginning. And so it was just like me taking the time to like sit back and actually think like, okay, what does give me joy? Like, what do I want to be doing? And like that, when I wrote my first book, that was like the first time that I feel like I had really done that, which like kind of sounds kind of crazy, but
no, it doesn't. I feel like this 2020 that's why with Maddi, I'm like, no, we're going with this because this like fuels my soul. Like every Sunday, no matter what happens during the week, I'm like on Sunday, get my head right, get my like blast off into the new week with like new goals and everything. So it is weird because I realized that I say a lot of things I want to do, but I haven't actually like written out my goals.